Somewhere tonight, someone is going to read a message they were never meant to see, and by the time they finish it, they will never be the same person again. If you are watching this video, there is a very good chance that someone is you. Stay until the very end. Because what I'm about to tell you is not the kind of thing you hear twice in one lifetime. And if you turn away in the next 10 seconds, you may spend years wondering what it was you almost found out tonight. You were chosen. Not because you were the strongest, not because you were the smartest, the richest, or the most talented person in the room. You were chosen because of something else entirely, something so quiet that even you have not fully understood it yet, and something so uncomfortable that the people closest to you have never had the courage to say it to your face. Tonight, I am going to say it, and once it is said, it cannot be unsaid. For years, you have felt it, haven't you? That strange, aching sense that you do not quite belong where you are standing, that you smile in rooms full of people and still feel like the only person there, that you have accomplished things others only dream of, and yet you still lie awake at night with a hollow feeling you cannot name. You have asked yourself more than once, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel like an outsider in my own life? Why does peace seem to visit everyone else but skip right over my door? Tonight you are going to understand exactly why, and the answer is going to break your heart before it puts you back together stronger than you have ever been. Here is the first truth they are hiding from you, and it is heavier than you think. The isolation you have felt your entire life was never a punishment. It was preparation. Every single person who has ever done something extraordinary with their one life first walked through a season of being completely and utterly alone, misunderstood by the very people who were supposed to know them best. Not because those people were evil, most of them were not. They simply could not see what you were becoming because you had not fully become it yet either. And so they judged the caterpillar for not looking like a butterfly, never once imagining that the very thing they mocked was the thing that would one day carry you somewhere they could never follow. But stay with me, because this is only the surface. What I'm about to tell you next is the part that most people are not ready to hear, and it is the part that will change how you see every single relationship in your life starting tonight. The people who hurt you the most were never your enemies. They were your assignment. Read that again. Every betrayal, every whispered rumor behind your back, every friend who quietly disappeared the moment your life started to change, every family member who rolled their eyes at your dreams, all of it was placed in your path for one reason only: to test whether you would become bitter or whether you would become better. Most people fail this test. They let the wound become their identity. They spend the rest of their lives talking about what was done to them instead of becoming what they were always meant to be. Tonight, you are going to choose differently. But before you can choose, you need to understand the full weight of what actually happened to you. Because right now, you only know half the story. Let me tell you about a man who almost gave up the night before everything changed for him. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. He was simply a man who had spent 15 years working towards something nobody else believed in. His own brothers laughed at him at family dinners. His closest friend, the one who knew all his secrets, quietly took his idea and tried to build it without him. His own father told him, more than once, that he was wasting his life chasing something that did not exist. On the night before the biggest opportunity of his life, he sat alone in his car outside his own house, unable to go inside, because he did not know how to face another day of pretending everything was fine when inside he felt like he was disappearing. He picked up his phone that night to write a message to end it all, but something stopped him. A single thought crossed his mind, so small it almost did not register, and that thought was this: what if the reason nobody understands me is not because something is wrong with me, but because I was never meant to be understood by them in the first place? What if I was built for a different room, a different life, a different level entirely, and everyone around me is simply standing at a floor I have already outgrown? It is worth pausing here to notice how ordinary that moment actually was. There was no lightning bolt of certainty, no dramatic voice from the sky, no sudden proof that everything would work out. There was only one small, quiet decision to keep going for one more day, made by a tired man sitting alone in a car who had every reasonable justification to give up and chose, against all of that reasonable justification, not to. Almost every meaningful turning point in a person's life looks exactly like this from the inside. Not cinematic, not obvious. Just one more ordinary decision to endure one more ordinary day, made quietly, without applause, by someone who had no way of knowing yet how much that single decision would eventually matter. That single thought saved his life, and 2 years later, the same brothers who laughed at him were asking him for help. The same friend who stole his idea watched it fail while his own version quietly succeeded beyond anything either of them imagined. The same father who told him he was wasting his life sat in the front row the day everything changed, crying tears he never expected to cry, finally understanding what his son had been trying to tell him all along. Before I tell you why this matters so much for your own life, I want you to notice something, because it will help you recognize yourself in everything I'm about to say. People who carry something the world has not seen yet almost always share the same quiet symptoms. And if even 3 of these describe you, then this video was never a coincidence tonight. You feel exhausted in a way sleep does not fix. You feel a strange guilt for wanting more, even though you have never told anyone that guilt exists. You have caught yourself crying for no clear reason, not out of sadness exactly, but out of some deep, wordless longing for a life that feels just out of reach. You have been called too much, too intense, too sensitive, too ambitious, by people who meant it as a criticism but who were, without realizing it, describing the very thing that will one day set you apart, and you have felt, more than once, a pull towards something bigger than your current circumstances, a pull you have never fully explained to another living soul, because you were afraid of how it would sound out loud. If any of that is true, keep listening, because the rest of this video was written for exactly the version of you that just recognized itself in those words. I am telling you this story because I need you to understand something before we go further. The truth they are hiding from you is not that you are broken. It is that you were never broken to begin with. You were simply early. You arrived in a world that was not ready for the version of you that was coming. And so the world did what it always does to things it cannot yet understand. It mocked it, it ignored it, it tried to shrink it down to something smaller and safer and easier to explain. But you were never meant to be explained. You were meant to be revealed, slowly, in your own time, in a way that would eventually leave no room for doubt. Now here is where it gets harder to hear. So take a breath, because what comes next is the part that will genuinely break your heart tonight, and I am not going to soften it, because you deserve the truth more than you deserve comfort right now. Some of the people who hurt you knew exactly what they were doing. This is the part nobody wants to admit out loud. Not every wound was an accident. Some people saw something in you, some light, some quiet strength, some potential they themselves were too afraid to chase, and instead of admiring it, they resented it. It is one of the darkest and most human truths that exists. People do not always attack what is weak. Very often, they attack what reminds them of the life they were too scared to build for themselves. Your growth became a mirror they could not stand to look into, so instead of looking inward and asking why your light bothered them so much, they tried to dim it. A sibling who competed with you instead of supporting you. A friend who disappeared the moment you needed them most. A partner who made you feel like too much for simply wanting more out of life, all of it. More common than you have ever been told, and all of it. More painful to accept than almost anything else in this life. I think of a young woman who spent years being the quiet one in every friend group she was ever part of. The one who listened more than she spoke. The one who supported everyone else's dreams while gently setting her own aside for later. When she finally started building something for herself. Something small at first, barely more than an idea and a few late nights of effort, she noticed something she did not expect. The very friends who had once encouraged her to dream bigger grew strangely distant the moment she actually started doing it. One friend stopped replying to her messages as quickly as before. Another made a joke at a dinner table that was funny enough to laugh off, but sharp enough to leave a mark. She spent months confused, wondering what she had done wrong, replaying conversations in her head, searching for some mistake she must have made to deserve the sudden coldness. It took her almost 2 years to understand that she had not made a mistake at all. She had simply started becoming someone, and becoming someone always costs you people who were only ever comfortable with who you used to be. Right now, some of you watching this are thinking the same thought you have thought 100 times before. The quiet voice that says, maybe it really is me. Maybe I really am too much. Maybe I am imagining all of this and the problem has been my own sensitivity the entire time. I want to speak directly to that voice for a moment because it deserves an honest answer. That voice is not entirely wrong, and it is not entirely right either. You are sensitive. Yes, but not in the way that voice wants you to believe. You are sensitive to truth, sensitive to imbalance, sensitive to the quiet dishonesty in rooms where everyone else has agreed to pretend not to notice it. That sensitivity has been mistaken for weakness by people who benefit from your silence, but it was never weakness. It has always been perception. And perception, however uncomfortable it feels to carry, is one of the rarest and most valuable things a person can possess. But here is the part that changes everything. So do not look away now, because if you leave before this next section, you will miss the entire reason this video exists. Their rejection of you was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof that you were already carrying something they could not compete with, even if none of you fully understood it at the time. Think about it honestly. Do people usually go out of their way to tear down someone who has nothing? Do they whisper behind the back of someone who poses no threat to their comfort? No. People only attack what unsettles them. And if your simple existence, your quiet effort, your refusal to give up, unsettled people enough to make them turn against you, that is not evidence of your weakness. That is evidence of a strength inside you so real that even you had not recognized it yet. Stay with me, because now we arrive at the truth that will genuinely break your heart tonight. The one the title of this video promised you, and I'm not going to make you wait any longer for it. The truth is this: you were never abandoned by accident. Every door that closed in your face, every opportunity that fell through at the last moment, every relationship that ended in a way you did not choose, all of it happened because a different, harder, more meaningful path was being cleared for you, one door at a time, even though it felt at the time like the world was simply taking things away from you. The version of you that exists right now, wounded, tired, but still here, still watching this video at this exact moment instead of giving up. That version of you could never have existed without every single one of those painful closed doors. If that relationship had not ended, you would have never grown into the person capable of receiving something far better. If that friend had not betrayed you, you would have never learned to trust your own judgment, instead of constantly seeking approval from people who were never going to give it honestly. If that job had not fallen apart, you would still be sitting comfortably in a life far too small for the person you are becoming. This is what breaks the heart the most, and also what heals it the deepest, if you let it. Every painful thing you have survived was never happening to you. It was happening for the version of you that had not been born yet. The one reading these words right now, the one who is stronger, wiser, and far more prepared for what is coming than the person you were before all of this began. There is one more piece of this puzzle you need before we go further, and it has to do with timing. Because timing is the part of this journey that breaks the most people before they ever reach the part where everything finally makes sense. You have watched other people your age reach milestones you have not reached yet. You have scrolled through moments of other people's success while sitting quietly with your own unfinished chapters, wondering if you have somehow fallen behind in a race nobody ever agreed to enter honestly. I need you to hear this clearly. Delay is not the same as denial. A door opening later does not mean it was never meant to open for you. Some foundations take longer to build precisely because what is meant to stand on them is heavier. And a house built in a single afternoon rarely survives its first real storm. The very fact that your path has taken longer than you expected is not proof that you are being punished. It may be the clearest proof that something is being built underneath you strong enough to hold whatever is coming next, and you simply cannot see the foundation from where you are currently standing. Stay with me a little longer, because now I want to talk directly to the part of you that has already thought of every reason why none of this applies quite as clearly to your own situation. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment, because this next part is going to feel deeply personal, almost like I'm speaking directly about your own life, and that is because in some way I am. Somewhere in your life right now, there is a decision you have been avoiding, a conversation you know you need to have but keep postponing, a dream you have quietly buried under excuses about timing, about money, about not being ready yet. A relationship you know in your gut has already run its course, but you stay because leaving feels more frightening than staying unhappy. A version of yourself you know you are capable of becoming, but you keep telling yourself, maybe next year, maybe when things settle down, maybe when I feel stronger. Tonight, I am asking you to be honest with yourself about exactly what that thing is. Do not look away from it. Do not distract yourself the way you usually do. Sit with it for just a moment because everything I'm about to say next depends on you being honest with yourself right now. Here is the second truth they do not want you to know, and this one is harder to accept than the first. You already know what you need to do. You have known for a long time. The confusion you feel is not because the answer is unclear. It is because the answer requires courage you have not yet decided to use. Nobody around you is going to tell you this, because it is far easier for people to comfort you in your hesitation than to challenge you toward your becoming. Your friends will tell you to take your time. Your family will tell you to be careful. Your own fear will tell you to wait just a little longer. But deep inside, in the quiet part of yourself that you only visit late at night when everything else is silent, you already know exactly what you're supposed to do. You have known for months, maybe years, and every day you delay it is a day you spend paying rent on a life that is no longer yours to live. I want to tell you about a woman who understood this too late, and then, by grace, not too late at all. She had spent almost a decade in a career that paid her well and left her feeling completely empty every single evening when she came home. She told herself she was being responsible. She told herself that dreams were for people who could afford to fail, and she could not. She watched years pass, birthdays blur together, and a quiet grief settle into her chest that she could never quite explain to anyone, including herself. One night, her mother, who was nearing the end of her life, took her hand and said something she never forgot. She said, "I did not raise you to be safe. I raised you to be alive. There is a difference, and I spent too many years confusing the two myself. I am only telling you now because I am running out of time to tell you anything at all." That woman left her job 4 months later, not recklessly, not without a plan, but with a clarity she had been avoiding for 10 years, finally choosing to build the life she had been quietly grieving for instead of the one she had settled for out of fear. 2 years later, she stood in front of a room of people she had once envied from a distance, no longer envying them, because she had finally become someone she no longer needed permission to respect. I am telling you this because somewhere in your life tonight, there is a version of that same choice waiting for you. And the truth they do not want you to know is that you do not need a perfect plan to begin. You only need enough honesty to admit what you have been avoiding, and enough courage to take one single step toward it before you go to sleep tonight. I know what some of you are already telling yourselves because it is the same thing almost everyone tells themselves right before they choose comfort over becoming. You're telling yourself that your situation is different, that you have responsibilities others do not have, that the timing is worse for you than it was for anyone in any story I could ever tell. I want you to know that I understand that fear is real, and that the responsibilities you carry are real too. But I also want you to know that almost every person who ever built a meaningful life did so while still carrying real fear and real responsibility, not after those things conveniently disappeared. There will never be a version of your life completely free of risk before you begin. There will only be the version of you willing to begin anyway, carrying the fear with you instead of waiting for it to leave first, because it never fully leaves, not for anyone, not even the people whose confidence you have quietly admired from a distance for years. I think about a young man who spent 3 years telling himself he would start next month, then next quarter, then next year, always waiting for a signal that never came, a moment of certainty that kept moving further away the longer he waited for it. What finally changed was not a new opportunity or a sudden burst of confidence. It was a single ordinary Tuesday evening when he simply got tired of being afraid of his own life. And instead of waiting for the fear to leave, he made one phone call he had been avoiding for years while the fear was still sitting right there beside him. That one call did not fix everything overnight, but it was the first domino, and within 18 months, the quiet, ordinary life he had been postponing had become the extraordinary one he had spent years only imagining from a safe distance. Now, stay with me just a little longer, because there is one more truth left, and this is the one that will stay with you the longest after this video ends. You have spent so much of your life trying to prove yourself to people who were never actually watching as closely as you feared. This is one of the strangest and most freeing truths a person can ever learn, and almost nobody learns it early enough. The people you have spent years trying to impress, trying to outrun, trying to prove wrong, most of them are far too consumed with their own struggles, their own doubts, their own quiet battles, to be thinking about you nearly as much as you have imagined. The stage you believed the whole world was watching you perform on was, most of the time, nearly empty. And the moment you finally understand this, something shifts inside you permanently. You stop performing for an audience that barely exists, and you start building a life for the only audience that ever truly mattered, which was always simply you, and whatever higher purpose placed you here to begin with. There is a strange kind of freedom that arrives the moment you stop performing for a crowd that was never really watching, and it usually arrives quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary evening, not in some dramatic moment you expected. You will be sitting alone, perhaps much like you are right now, and you will simply notice that the tight, anxious feeling you used to carry into every room has loosened its grip just slightly. You will realize you no longer need the approval of the people who once controlled your mood with a single glance or a single dismissive comment. You will notice that you can finally sit in silence without reaching for your phone to fill it. Because the silence no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like company. This is what people rarely tell you about the process of becoming who you were always meant to be. It is not loud. It does not usually arrive with applause or recognition from the very people you once wanted it from most. It arrives in the quiet moments, in the choice to keep going even when nobody is clapping, in the decision to trust the process even when the outside world has given you no evidence yet that it is working. This is the final truth, and it is the one I want you to remember long after this video is over. You were never meant to live a life that made everyone comfortable. You were never meant to shrink yourself down until you fit neatly into everyone else's expectations. You were chosen, quietly and without ceremony, to carry something the people around you could not yet understand, and every painful chapter of your life so far has simply been the process of shaping you into someone capable of finally carrying it. The isolation was not abandonment. It was preparation. The betrayal was not proof of your weakness. It was proof of a strength you had not yet learned to recognize in yourself. And the ache you feel tonight, the one that brought you to this video in the first place, is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something inside you is finally ready to be born. So here is what I want you to do right now, before you close this video and return to your ordinary evening. Take one honest look at the thing you have been avoiding. The conversation, the decision, the dream, the ending you know needs to happen. And instead of waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect amount of courage, the perfect circumstances that will never actually arrive, I want you to take one small step toward it tonight. Send the message you have been avoiding. Write down the first sentence of the plan you have been postponing. Have the conversation you have rehearsed 100 times in your head but never said out loud. It does not need to be the whole journey. It only needs to be the first honest step, because that is how every single person who ever became who they were meant to be actually began. One uncomfortable, honest, terrified step at a time. I want to be honest with you about one more thing before we close, because it would be unfair to leave you with only the beautiful parts of this truth. Choosing to finally step into who you were meant to be does not mean the pain disappears overnight. It does not mean the people who misunderstood you will suddenly understand. Some of them never will, and that is a grief you will have to make peace with in your own time, quietly, without needing their apology to move forward. Some relationships that end will not come back, and some doors that closed will stay closed forever. But here is what nobody tells you about that kind of loss. Every single thing you outgrow makes space for something that actually fits the person you are becoming. You cannot carry a bigger life while still holding on tightly to a smaller one, and at some point, every person who has ever built something meaningful has had to open their hands and let go of what no longer belonged, even when it hurt more than they expected it to. Remember how this video began. Somewhere tonight, someone was going to read a message they were never supposed to see, and it would break something inside them before it healed it. That message was never written by another person. It was written by your own life, delivered through every quiet ache, every closed door, every friend who disappeared, every night you lay awake wondering what was wrong with you. Tonight, you finally read it in full, and now you understand what it always meant. Nothing was ever wrong with you. You were simply early, and the world is only now catching up to what you were always meant to become. You were chosen for this life, exactly as it is unfolding, exactly with all of its pain and all of its quiet, hidden preparation. Nothing that has happened to you so far has been wasted, even the parts that felt unbearable at the time. And if you made it this far in this video, watching until the very last word, that alone tells me something important about you. It tells me you are not someone who walks away easily. It tells me that somewhere inside you, even on your hardest nights, there is still a quiet refusal to give up completely. Hold on to that. Protect that. Because that very quality, the one that kept you here until the final sentence of this video, is the exact same quality that is going to carry you through everything that is still ahead of you. The truth has been said now, and it cannot be unsaid. What you choose to do with it next is entirely up to you.